Hi, everybody. My name is Igor. I'm a UX designer at Wix. I've been working in a team called Premium. Basically, we're responsible for all of the financial relationship between Wix and its users. And I'm a UX designer, and obviously, this is like a dev-centered conference, but I do want to share my experience on some of the tools that you have seen today that were presented to you today and yesterday that kind of helped us inside the team, and not only developers but other disciplines, and me especially. So I want to talk about the way we work. When we work in a team environment, we have all of those different disciplines, and we have this product life cycle from the product ideation till we ship out the initial version. So when we imagine our workflow, specifically like the designers and the developers workflow, we like to think of it like as of like a concurrent work, a sync work, where we both just like running towards the finish line. But obviously, first of all, it's never a smooth road. There's always like a bumps in the road. But to my point, I think that most of the time, most of the cases, the experience looks something like this. We do have some type of a concurrent work. We do have this like the designer has this phase where he's doing his research, his low fidelity, his sketches. The developer has his dev environment set up, backend integrations, CI, CD integrations. But we do get to a point where the designer and the developer do meet and come together. And at this point, you kind of don't have those straight lines anymore. Basically, if I'll just like break down a little bit the process of a UX designer, where the project usually starts, we start off with, again, the product ideation. We do some rough sketches. We map out all of our user journeys. Um, and once we have a kind of like a initial consensus on the core UX, we move to what we call the high fidelity phase, where we map out the product and all of its screens and all of its cases from start to finish. Um, and this at this point, I create this my spec, this design ball, and I share it with the developer. Sit down together with him, and he basically starts breaking down all of the project into small pieces, into small components, and then like integrating them up into the bigger application. Then, once the developer has something to show, like this initial iteration, he sends off to the entire team and specifically to me. And we enter what we call the UX QA phase. At this point, basically, I'm going over the developer's implementation, finding out bugs, places where he missed or was not implemented accordingly. And we start this like back and forth ping pong where I create, usually at Wix, we do it in the form of a Jira, and like any other like channel, like Slack or just in person or meetings and like just like typical syncs. But at this point, we do enter this loop where I'm sending out pushbacks and like assigning new tasks to the developer, and the developer is sending back the new iteration where I can go over his new changes. Um, and from that point on, it just repeats on and on. And there are some projects where it's like just like one round of QA is enough, but others sometimes it feels like it's a never-ending story. So we basically do arrive at the point where we are kind of codependent on each other, where one cannot advance before the other finished and handing over his work. Um, and I like obviously everybody can relate like to this meme where like at some point into the project, into this like loop number three of UX QA, it does feel like like this GIF where like maybe the designer feels some resentment towards the developer because he feels like he's not implementing his designs, and maybe sometimes he says they're not even a blocker. On the other hand, obviously the developer can get like super frustrated with the designer like opening thousand tasks and like complaining about why the border radius is 6 pixels and not 8 pixels. Um, and I just want to like point out that obviously it's not all bad, and I've been working again at Wix for the past 6 years, and the system works. We've created a bunch of amazing products throughout the years, but I think it is important to kind of challenge the concepts and our methodologies and the way we work. And we do see some shortcomings with this process. So we like to think it's not a waterfall process, but it does have this waterfall mindset at like specific points of the project where we are codependent and like just passing those huge balls to each other. Um, and things do get lost in translation. We do have, for some reason, it's just like feels so obvious to everybody that the designer and the developer, or like any other discipline, just understands the other discipline. Just because maybe we're on the same team, we're both like working in the same company, but it's just like not trivial. Like if I wanted to speak to somebody who speaks only Spanish, I would have to pull up my phone and open up Google Translate to be that mediator, to be that middleman, to help me translate my English or my Hebrew to Spanish and vice versa. And we don't have this tool, we don't have this thing in the middle that helps us. Specifically, I'm talking about designers and developers where they do have a very intense dynamic at some point of a project. And things do get lost in translation because there's nothing that actually is translating what we like communicate to each other, and eventually resulting in lower velocity. We start the project, like with great velocity. We have a bunch of tools, we have a bunch of knowledge, we have our design system, but we do get to a point where we kind of feel like, well, we should have been like just shipped the product already, and we're not there. So I want to talk to you about my experience a few years ago, where I was handed a new project and I had an opportunity to kind of challenge exactly that, this type of workflow. Back in 2019, me and my team, we were tasked with creating a new project. We were handed over a new project. It was called the Wix Product Catalog. It's basically a platformized CMS that was supposed to allow product managers and product marketing managers to quickly create and customize, manage, and create and mix and match different premium plans, different offerings, premium offerings that Wix offers to its users. Just like for a quick reference, I don't know if you know, but we have our pricing plan, our offering, our premium offering. And obviously we test this area a lot. We, again, as I said, we mix and match different plans, different features with different pricing. And we needed this place where we could allow Wix employees to quickly create new offerings, new plans to test out, to send out to our users to see if it's moving the needle at all. And since it was intended to be an internal tool, obviously not for our users, only for Wix employees, and exactly at that time, Wix launched what we know today, Wix Velo, but at that time was just called Wix Code. We thought this would be the perfect opportunity to test the new technology and test out the new platform. So we decided to create this project in Wix Editor and Wix Code, Wix Velo. So my first impressions, like going into the project, like the first week or two, things didn't look too different. Like we were still doing the same things we were doing back in the day. I was busy with just like the product ideation, sketches, mocks, low fidelity wireframes. And the designer, same thing. The developer, same thing. Was like just breaking down the project, understanding all the specs and requirements, mapping out all the stories and all the technical requirements in the Jira. And at the beginning, like obviously there was no like velocity. We were still not using the new tools, but we're kind of like, so is something going to change? Is it going to be any different? And eventually, towards week 2 or somewhere around week 3, things did start changing and kind of morphing into some like into an uncharted territory. And this basically happened when I was done with my initial sketches. And at this point, as I said, I'm about to move to the high fidelity phase where I'm supposed to move to Figma and start like mapping out all the product, like start to finish and making it pixel perfect, like doing UI implementation. Um, but since we were using the Wix editor, I thought it was kind of pretty intuitive for me to just like start doing the high fidelity phase on top of the editor itself. So I started implementing all of the designs, all of my designs in the editor itself. And the developer, on the other hand, instead of obviously working in his like beloved IDE in his local environment, he as well moved to the editor because it was about time to start learning the new platform. He had no idea and like no understanding how the new API works. And obviously there was like a learning curve, but I must say that I think for the developer, the learning curve was steeper because for me, it kind of felt more intuitive because like creating a div or like a container in Figma or creating a div or a container in the editor didn't seem too different. But for the developer, I kind of saw this struggle where like a lot of concepts and a lot of like best practices and things he knew how to do were completely different in the new platform. Like just like simple things like iterating over an array was strange to him. Like it was a completely new API. So obviously for him, it was a bit harder. But nonetheless, like aside from the struggles, and again, as I said, the velocity maybe was not that high at the beginning. It was kind of amazing to see that for the first time we were actually working in the same place, like kind of on the same thing. So I was working on this sidebar and I was designing it and like deciding all the spacings and all the paddings and the colors. And the developer was just below me, like in the code panel, implementing the logic. It was pretty amazing to see it. It was a first for me. And I don't want to like put any tags on any developers, but like specifically in my case, the developer that was working with me, and I know there's a lot of developers that kind of didn't sign up for like moving divs all day and like deciding on layouts. And for my developer, it was super refreshing where I was now responsible. I was now the owner of all of those small things that usually kind of was bothering to him. And a lot of the times the UX phase and all of the tasks were kind of around the same thing. Like, listen, the padding is supposed to be 12 and not 8, and the border radius is supposed to be 30 instead of 24, and the color is not exactly right. It's supposed to be white and not off-white. And all of those small little things that usually like takes time. And obviously we did have a design system, but things always get like, they just get broken and like we need to fix them. And a lot of times the developer maybe doesn't even have the skill or just doesn't have like the patience to take care of all of those layout and design things, implementations. So it was really refreshing for him to kind of just focus on the business logic and let me take care of all of the UI stuff. And as we advanced into the project, we kind of saw the velocity like kind of going back to where it was supposed to be, what we were expecting, kind of getting back on track. And we realized that obviously for the next time we're going to work on a new project or like a new page or like a new feature for our application, the velocity is going to be there. And it was like at some point we kind of like were already like streamlining our process. We were creating new elements on the page. The developer was implementing all of the logic. We're in sync on our work. But like once we were done with like the first page of our application, which came pretty soon, we hit like our first like major blocker. And obviously it happened when we needed to create that second page or that second tab, or when we had like we saw a bunch of like instances of the same element just repeating on the page. And we knew it's not going to scale. Like we knew we can create like this small application, but we will not be able to scale it up. And it was like at some point it was really hard to look at the code. Like you would open the code panel, you would just see like past the code where the UI logic is getting mixed up with all the business logic, and you were seeing like duplicates of the same logic on different like pages for some just because we had to do it, we had to repeat ourselves. And it was really hard, first of all, to just like create that same instance of the component over and over again. Although it's a lot of times just like copy pasting, but still, once we had to like fix a bug or introduce a new feature, we had to fix that bug in all of those repeating instances, and it would really slow us down. We realized that with some point we'll need to abandon this project because there was no way for us to scale it up, because again, as I said, introducing new features, fixing bugs was almost impossible, and just like everything was buried inside this like unlegible code. And I think like with the perfect timing, Wix came out with the alpha version of Wix Blocks, and it was our like lifeline because basically it allowed us to abstract and like consolidate a lot of our UI logic and business logic, and then kind of streamline our process towards a bigger application. So Wix Blocks, basically, it's a subset of the editor. It will feel really familiar to those of you who know the editor. Basically, it allows you to create widgets, to create so-called components. And those components and this like component library that you create can be consumed across different pages, different sites. And the cool part is that obviously as a component, it exposes a bunch of events, callback functions, and you can pass props to it, which makes it awesome to create like generic components that can be highly reusable. I just want to give you an example of one component that was like repeating a lot, and to show you how easy was it for us to just like take something that we already developed, both on the UX side and on the dev side, and just to abstract it into a new widget, a new component. So obviously it's a CMS, so we're going to have a lot of tables on our page, and we had like pages with 2 tables, and then like you need to duplicate them across like 7 different pages. It was a nightmare. So in the video you're seeing on the screen, basically I'm recreating the same UI I've done on the host site. I'm creating just like this basic table using a repeater. And then the developer could come in and basically write all of its logic. A lot of times we would just like copy paste the existing logic we've already developed in our site. And what you're seeing right now on the screen, it's nothing special. It's just like binding data to the repeater, to the elements on stage. And the cool part is in the next code block. Basically, we're exposing a function, I'm calling it set data, where we can pass an array of objects and then let the component handle the state and all of the rendering that's supposed to happen inside the element itself. Back in the actual host site, we can import our new widget, a new widget library, where we're going to have a bunch of widgets we created in Wix Blocks. And this time, we're going to complete the logic on the other side, on the host itself. And we're going to, just for the example, I've created a data set. I'm querying it, and all of the data that comes back from the database, I'm passing to the function that I've exposed in the widget called set data. And again, the cool part is that now it's fully encapsulated. All of the logic, the UI logic and the business logic, gets managed by the component. Is the owner. And just to kind of emphasize on how nice it is and how clean your code and your code base can get, I'm creating a new widget in this video called loader, just like a GIF and just like a small piece of string text. And the cool part is that I can actually like add a widget inside a widget. So in this case, I've added a multi-state container to my table, and I've created three states. One is like an empty state when there's like no items either came back from the search or from the query, or I've searched for a string that didn't result in any matches. The second state is a loading state where like it's waiting for the data to come in. And the third one is the ready state. So the cool part is that I can add this loader widget inside the loading state and then update the code to reflect that. So it's waiting and it's in the state loading once the data is not there. And once it's there, you can change the state to ready and render all the UI. And again, it's pretty cool that you can let the component handle itself. It can be controlled, it can be uncontrolled, but now we're abstracting more and more code. As you can see in the example, I just passed the data and I'm letting the component handle it on its own. And it was so cool to kind of, as a designer, to start playing around with like the idea of a component-based architecture. Like I know it like from static PNGs from Figma, but to actually see it like implemented in code and being so close to the like kind of to the decisions and to the whole architecture, as I said, was really amazing. And I'm just like quoting the developer. He said that it was like super refreshing to sit down together and think about how we would structure our components, like from the smallest leaves to the to bigger atoms to like large compound compositions. It was really fun for both of us. It was like a real learning experience. And you know, again, as I said, moving like I was kind of surprised that eventually I got to the point where if like back in the day I was creating specs, those like huge pages for the developer, now I'm basically creating specs for myself. So I'm mapping all the states of the component, and then I can go to the editor and implement exactly what I was expecting, obviously, with like consulting with the developer and with his help with the actual implementation. And at some point we actually got to over 40 components, and we were just like at that point we were just like streamlining our process. So we were creating pages like crazy. It was just like a matter of dragging and dropping different components, attaching them to the business logic of the host site itself. And the additional value was that like we had new emerging projects that wanted to play around with the platform as well, and we could share with them our component library. And their bootstrap process, their boilerplate was like just like they were just like kickstarting their project much better that we would have ever imagined to start with. So there's additional value to sharing the knowledge you've gained and obviously the things you've created, and it's super shareable and super customizable, and it was pretty awesome. Um, so throughout this like whole like start to finish to actually shipping this product to the different PMs at inside Wix, it was such a learning experience. Like for the first time, I felt like I actually had this common language with the developer. I was getting to know like more of like his lingo. He was getting more like accustomed with like my lingo. I was actually like understanding things like objects, understanding things like state and props, and maybe even like events and functions. I was not like afraid to kind of hear those words where like at the beginning I had like no clue what he's talking about. And the developer actually was like super like into like getting involved in all of the UX decisions and how we should represent different states and how we should like convey messages to our users. Like he was getting more on board on like my side of things. And I have to say that it's kind of absurd to me that I kind of realized that like in hindsight that a lot of times like designers, they design for this medium called the web. And a lot of times we don't actually know the capabilities or the limitations of this platform. And I feel that me getting closer to the actual platform, the web, taught me about what are like the limitations and what can I do on the web itself. I've seen a lot of times where designers are kind of like asking the developer to kind of put fireworks or fold the page in half, and they get like pushbacks immediately, and then they need to go back to the drawing board and think about like a new solution. And all of those things kind of were not present in our project because like I understood what were the limits of the platform, so I could come up with solutions quicker and more accurate to the platform we're developing for. And just like it helps you to just like cut those feedback loops that just are not necessary. Um, and again, being part of this mindset of a component-based architecture was like a first for me, and I think that every designer should at least like read a little bit about this mindset and this way of structuring and thinking about a project or an app, because it really helps you to kind of come up with better UX solutions. It definitely helped me throughout the project and projects that came after that. I just want to give you like small tips on how you can get started with Wix Code, with Wix Velo, with the editor, with Editor X. You don't have to overcomplicate things. You can start simple. Like the idea here is not to replace a methodology that is already working. It's there for a reason. It is working. We're just changing the tools and those middlemans and those mediators. That same phone with the like the Google Translate that kind of helps you translate things. Yeah, think about it like that, and it will actually help you become a better professional. So again, as I said, start small, start exactly as you would start any other project with those rough sketches, like just like get your idea out there. But as soon as you have this consensus on the UX, you can start like moving towards the editor itself. And at this point, I think it's a good idea to involve the developer. And this is, I think, one of the greater values of the platform. You can involve the developer much sooner in the process when using Wix Code, Wix Velo, and the editor. Because if you remember, right now I'm supposed to be like in the high fidelity phase. I'm supposed to be in Silo on this island called Figma. Obviously, I can always like come up to the developer and ask him, but it's just not the same thing. And once you're already implementing your design inside the editor and you're deciding to implement different components and like think about states and think about layouting, you can consult with the developer. And I promise you, he's going to have like amazing insights for you. And as I said, start small, start with just like a simple page, especially if it's your first time playing around with all the different technologies in the platform. But as soon as you have like something initial that you can show people, and you start like recognizing those patterns, those repeating instances of different components, they can be small, like just like a loader button, where you want to put like a loader state on a button and you want to encapsulate it to later on reuse it a bunch of times, or you have this compound element like a table, and you can make it generic enough to make it repeat across different pages, consuming just like one component. Then sit down again with your developer, think about a strategy, how you can like break down the components, the page into small components, and maybe break those components into even smaller components, and then start moving to Wix Blocks. I promise you're gonna enjoy the platform. It's pretty amazing. And just like on a personal note, like just like tips for working with the platform, I think I kind of like I'm not only working on Wix Code, and I'm obviously using our old ways and like different tech stacks and different UX stacks, but I did like take some things from this experience working in this type of way. And I think like the idea is to be curious. Like it opened this channel with different disciplines, not only the developer, and it kind of helped me to realize how like their mind things and what's their like line of thought. And you'll be surprised how many times you're gonna get like amazing input and insights on things like you're responsible basically. Use Wix Blocks. Start small. Don't overcomplicate things. Don't start thinking about breaking things like from the beginning and like bottom up. Start small. Start with a small application. Look that everything works for you, and then like abstract as you go, encapsulate your components, your architecture. I think this platform allows you to, because you're like in this live environment and the developer can already integrate all the API endpoints to the backend, ask him to plug it into your components, even if it's like in its initial stages, because you're gonna be surprised how many times um, your design is gonna break because there was just like one case that you didn't cover. Like it can be a string that was returned from the backend, where like you were expecting like a max string of like 10 and you got back like 32, and like now you have this line break that doesn't correspond with your design. Or you were expecting, I don't know, like in a table 8 entries and then you got back 20, and now you need to think about pagination and how many should I put on the page. All those things are super crucial, and the sooner you find those like bugs and like kind of like quirks in your design, the sooner you can fix them. And just in general, I want to say that I think we should always challenge our job title. Just like maybe if not break the boundaries, at least allow yourself to blur the lines. I definitely felt that way. The developer that I worked with on this project and other projects in this type of matter told me that they did feel that they are kind of blurring the lines between, like, maybe I'm now doing a bit of more UX, I'm now a UX designer doing more development, and the mindsets maybe they kind of morph and maybe blend together. Some product decisions, some BA a line of thought. So just like allow yourself to like be open to new ideas, new workflows, new types of working in a team. It doesn't have to be, by the way, in a team. It can be like a client professional relationship. But just like, again, open your mind and break your job title boundaries. Thank you very much.